Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, sorry, that was a bit...
Wake up.
I'll hold it further away. A big welcome to our workshop, Regulation, the Global Picture. I'm Will Godfrey, the founding editor of Filter, and given the daunting scale of our subject, I'm mightily relieved to have next to me a crack team of international experts. They include Agnieszka Wyszynka, who is the global head of regulatory policy for external affairs at PMI. We have Barnaby Page, who's the editorial director of Tamarind Intelligence, which publishes, among other things, e-cig intelligence, something to which we can all aspire. We have Thomas O'Gorman, who is a lawyer. He's the co-founder of ProVapio Mexico, and he's a board member for INCO, the International Consumer Organization. And finally, we have Joseph Magero, who chairs the campaign for safer alternatives, and many of you will know as a big name in African tobacco harm reduction. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So the way this will work, I have some initial questions to put to the panelists. I have some follow-ups in reserve, but in the spirit of a workshop, I'm hoping that you, the audience, can contribute a great deal as well in terms of thoughts, questions, examples for our panelists to respond to, and I will be inviting those contributions early in proceedings, so please have them ready. And as we wade into potentially the weeds of global regulation, let's keep in mind, of course, that lives very literally depend on how well or how badly this is done. To start with, I'll go straight to Barnaby to roll in two of the earlier sessions on this subject, the sessions on regulation in Australia and the Philippines, two contrasting examples, obviously. And Barnaby, I'd be grateful if you could just give us an overview of what you heard there, your thoughts, and some of your takeaways.
Sure, yes, thank you, Will. So as Will says, there were sessions earlier this morning at the very beginning of this GFN event on regulation and regulatory initiatives in both the Philippines and Australia, two very contrasting countries. So I'd just like to, I'm not going to sort of go through chapter and verse, as it were, but I'd just like to run down sort of some of the key points of those and some thoughts I had about them. Now, Australia is probably the better known of those two markets internationally in terms of e-cigarette regulation or regulation of novel nicotine products in general. And not for good reasons, it has to be said. It's generally seen as an unnecessarily restrictive regime, I think it's fair to say. And in fact, its regulation has got even tighter more recently. There have been new measures introduced, including restrictions on nicotine-free imports, flavors. I believe they're talking about plain packaging. Now, Australia is a country where you can, in theory, obtain e-cigarettes or on a prescription model. I think many people will probably share my own cynicism about prescription models, wondering not only whether they work, but whether they're even really designed to work at all. The Australian government has promised that prescribing will become easier, along with its new restrictions. Whether that is simply a kind of sop to the opinion of harm reduction advocates, I don't know. We had a presentation from an Australian GP this morning with some pretty shocking on-the-ground realities there. Fewer than 5% of Australian doctors currently can prescribe nicotine at all. That in a country where many people have problems with geographical access to doctors, apart from anything else, and most of those who can prescribe are private. So your vapor, or should I say your aspiring vapor, who perhaps lives in a very remote town and can't afford private medicine, realistically has no hope of obtaining e-cigarettes under this prescription model. The result has been, unsurprisingly, a very large illicit market, and we heard an estimate that 90% of the Australian vapor market is in fact illicit, and that use is growing among younger people, which of course is an indication that prescription model is not working at all, since growth among younger people is generally the thing that regulation is primarily trying to avoid. Again, another staggering figure that adds up to 100 million disposables being imported illicitly into Australia. Now, it is an island country. They have promised to step up enforcement at the borders. How effective that will be, it remains to be seen. Whether the response is proportional to the threat is something we have to make our own minds up on. But I think we probably can all agree that it's not. So why is this the case in Australia? Well, of course, there are all the bigger, well-rehearsed reasons for opposition to novel nicotine products that we're all familiar with. But a couple of things sort of that were pointed out in passing, particularly with regard to the Australian market. One is the general background of the very bitter war on tobacco that has now become a war on nicotine, the identification of e-cigarettes and novel nicotine products in general with the tobacco industry. Another one, an interesting point I thought, was a more general reluctance to challenge conformity, to challenge what an established expert says or whatever. So if somebody in a prominent health body is saying e-cigarettes or vaping are harmful, then you just go along with it and nod your head. So that's Australia, not a very optimistic scenario there, though as has been pointed out, things can change. The Philippines, very, very different. Now, this is a country with pretty much twice the smoking rate of Australia. Australia, as you know, has been a very, very active country on reducing smoking in general, not just the consumption of novel nicotine. The Philippines has been through quite a bumpy ride in regulatory terms, but after 10 years, 23 bills, 10 public hearings of different sorts, and a variety of different regulations, it's now come out of what you might call a fairly anti-vape scenario, in which the former president actually said that vaping was more dangerous than smoking, into a much more positive one. And there is a new law that came into force last year, although I believe it's not entirely been enforced yet, which was aimed to provide a much better fit to novel nicotine products. In other words, not simply regulating them as if they were tobacco products, but looking at what are the products themselves, what do they do, in what ways that might they be positive or negative. First, and this I think is important, it recognized novel nicotine products as a category in themselves. Again, saying, these are not just cigarettes by any other name, these are different things, they deserve different kinds of regulation. It imposed an age restriction, of course, everybody does that. Interestingly, it went for the lower of two options, though. It didn't go for 21, as was contemplated by some Philippines lawmakers. They actually went for 18 to be consistent with smoking. It restricted public vaping quite heavily. I think that is interesting. That's quite frequently something that doesn't happen at national level in many countries. It's often more down to sort of local government levels, whether those are states or municipalities or what have you. And I thought most fascinating of all in terms of the Philippine approach was the approach to flavors. Now, flavors are, of course, a huge issue at the moment, and we can say that the debate over flavors is essentially a proxy for the debate over youth vaping. That's what it is. Nobody is really actually opposed to flavors. They're opposed to the appeal of flavors to youth. So the Filipino lawmakers zoomed in on this very tightly and said, okay, the actual flavor, how the product actually tastes, is not in itself the issue. The issue is, if you like, how people perceive that flavor to be. So while they did not restrict the actual flavors that are available, they placed their restrictions on the names of flavors and on the way those flavors are packaged and presented. So you could have your, I guess in theory, you could have your sort of caramel candy floss unicorn flavor in the Philippines, but you need to describe it in a very plain and boring way that will only appeal to adults. Just to run through a few more things on that country then, before I hand back to Will. As I said, it was a fairly bumpy road for the Philippines in getting to what looks like this pretty enlightened regulatory position. There were disagreements in the medical establishment and the scientific establishment. there were issues dealing with the many different types of products, not just within e-cigarettes, but also other types of novel nicotine product. We said that one size doesn't fit all in terms of novel nicotine versus cigarettes, but equally, what's appropriate for vapor may not be appropriate, say, for snus or shisha. So to an extent, you have to look at these categories separately, and then you have to decide, how granular can you realistically get. And another problem, of course, was the whole issue of misinformation, which is something we see increasingly dominating the debate about novel nicotine products internationally, particularly in the United States, perhaps. So EVALI, diacetyl, etc., etc. But most encouragingly, the Philippines came out of this with an opinion that I think many countries would do well to emulate and many do not emulate, which is that instead of the government's role being to suppress these alternatives, the government actually had an obligation to its citizens to provide an alternative to harmful smoking. I hope there's nobody going to quote me on that one. So I think the lesson from the Philippines is that though, risk reduction and harm reduction, they are a hard sell. We live in a world where, a lot of people would like to see 0% risk in everything. And in a sense, it's much easier to say, okay, we will completely eliminate this risky thing so there's no chance of anybody being harmed by it. The more realistic approach that they've been taken, actually, it does have the net effect of reducing harm, even by allowing something that is, arguably slightly harmful in itself onto the market. So a hard sell, but they seem to have convinced the right people in the end. So that was me. Thank you.
Thanks very much for those summaries of two very different examples, Barnaby, and a number of themes that we may later return to. But for now, let's continue to zip around the world and turn next to Europe, where Agnieszka has significant expertise. And I just wonder if you could give us an overview, considering that there are many people in this room who are not from Europe, just of the regulatory situation in the EU and the direction in which you think things might be heading.
So maybe, can you hear me? Yes? No? Thank you. Now it should be better. So yes, indeed, so maybe let's recap a bit the situation in Europe because it's quite particular in the EU. So we have a, let's say, double layer of the regulations. We have the EU harmonization rules, which apply to all 27 countries, in the past also to the UK. And the regulatory framework for tobacco and nicotine-containing products is defined under the Tobacco Products Directive, the so-called TPD, which basically sets the basic rules for the quality and safety of the products, for the market access of the products, the labeling, health warnings, etc. So I know that we tend to criticize more and more TPD as not as efficient as possible regulatory framework. But let's remember it was adopted in 2012. It was proposed and adopted 2014. And basically it was the first comprehensive, I would say, regulatory framework that regulated novel tobacco products and e-cigarettes, so the first attempt. And these products, especially novel tobacco products, were not really yet present on the markets that much. So also the knowledge of these products was not yet that well established among the regulators. Nevertheless, I think it was a very good basis for regulating the products. Then the second layer of the regulation in the EU is the national regulation, because obviously you have the split of the competence. So the EU harmonization rules to secure the internal market, and harmonize rules for these products, but at the same time, the national authorities in each and every member state can design their own regulation that will be adapted to the national purposes, health objectives, etc. And that typically applies to advertising rules, the sales arrangements, indoor use, etc. So anything that is applicable to the national level. So this is the current situation when it comes to the regulation in the EU. Now, what we see today, there are, of course, certain trends, emerging developments in the market that are influencing the situation and are also triggering some of the reactions of the regulators. And my personal view on that is today, I think we have quite a lot of polarization of the views in the EU, especially when it comes to the national regulations. So we see examples of countries similar to Australia to some extent, and we see examples of countries which are going more in the direction of Philippines. And this is what I have in mind in terms of polarization. So countries like, for instance, Czech Republic, Greece, Slovakia, Sweden, they are more favoring the alternatives to smoking. They see the benefit of these products, and therefore they are trying to incorporate this third pillar of harm reduction to the existing policies. So not only cessation and prevention, but they also see the benefit of these products. On the other side of the spectrum, we see countries which take more prohibitionist approach, unfortunately, so more a la Australia style, and they are basically saying, well, we stick to the precautionary principle. We don't know yet all the risks of these products, so let's wait until further evidence is available, and in the meantime, let's restrict as much as possible. So that goes in the direction of full equalization, so with cigarettes, and as we have heard already during the past workshops, it does not serve at all the consumers, or even prohibitionist approaches. And especially these days, as I mentioned, we see some emerging trends, new products coming to the market like nicotine pouches, and unfortunately some countries are taking more prohibitionist approach. One of the recent examples, Belgium, with the outright ban already introduced. Some other countries like the Netherlands debating the same. We heard some news, unfortunate news from France, again, a proposal to ban nicotine pouches. So you see, these polarized views are now gaining traction in the EU, and it will be very interesting to see in which direction it will go, because we are expecting soon the revision of the Tobacco Products Directive. What does it mean for the future TPD and overall regulatory framework in the EU? To be seen. That might lead to actually countries advocating for more flexibility within the TPD, so maybe less harmonization, more freedom for the member states to design their own policies. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the situation in the EU.
Thank you so much for that roundup. I really appreciate it. I'm interested, you talk about sort of a polarization of views developing in the EU at the moment. Is that characterized by a kind of a left-right political split to some degree, or are we talking more about sort of country by country unique differences?
I would say country by country. I think I would not say there's affiliation with the political affiliation of the thinking. It's more the governments who are a bit more open-minded that are approaching the tobacco harm reduction and trying to see what are the benefits. But we see also that traditional tobacco control countries like France, for instance, Belgium is becoming there as well, that are taking more extremist approach actually. And they are not, of course, looking at the needs of the consumers. They are just looking, as we discussed, big tobacco, this is the evil that they need to regulate. So that's the situation in the EU.
Thanks again, Agnieszka. We'll return to questions around big tobacco later, but let's move now across the Atlantic to Mexico, which is where Tomas is from. I don't ask this with great optimism, Tomas, but could you tell us about the current attitude of the Mexican government and regulators to tobacco harm reduction, and also the direction in which you believe things are heading?
Well, as you may be aware, in Mexico, vaping products and in general THR products, as HTPs are also included, are banned. The extent of the ban refers to commercialization and to production and imports. It is not, the use is not forbidden, but the government has been taking steps to reinforce the prohibition. And the problem also, as Barney was saying, is that these stances against THR products are accompanied by very strong campaigns of misinformation because they have to support the prohibition. I mean, the prohibition tends to be questioned by people if they know what the products are. So we have seen a very strong campaign of misinformation in Mexico that I do think is only propaganda in order to sustain and to justify a prohibition that it's so absurd. And where is the Mexican government heading? I think they want to keep this way, and eventually, if regulation comes, they will try to regulate as the alternatives in the same way as tobacco is being regulated, which in a way is kind of a prohibitionist regulation. I think we need to remember the very nature of the existing laws and policies pertaining to tobacco, because the FCTC does not recognize a continuum of risk among tobacco products, and therefore all the rules are designed to destroy the offering of the products or destroy the demand. So the nature of these rules is set to destroy the consumption eventually. And we need that THR is regulated on a different point of view. Yes, we need a balanced regulation. Yes, we need to protect minors, of course, but we need in some way to promote uptake of the products by smokers. And you cannot promote uptake if you are using rules that were designed originally to destroy the product, right? So what I would like from Mexico is to embrace THR as the base and as an ideological base of the policies or in the design of the policies. Unless if we only have the abstinence model and the abstinence ideology, there is no much future for THR, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for telling us about that situation, which again we will come back to. But just to include Joseph finally, and I believe you're going to speak to both Kenya specifically and Africa as a region to tell us about circumstances there and direction of travel.
Okay, thank you. Well, for Africa, first of all, the challenge we're facing is that up to 90% of the new nicotine products are illicit. They're sold in the black market. So what governments are doing is they're using a copy-paste policy to ban them, and this is by overtaxing them. Unfortunately for us in Kenya, we have organizations such as CTFK. They send basically PhD policymakers, and they draft policy on our behalf, and they give it to the government, and the government is passing this policy. And the policy is to classify all these products as tobacco products, which like we have nicotine pouches in Kenya, but the new policy suggests that you should have images of people dying from lung cancer, which does not come from products such as nicotine pouches. We have very, very few tobacco harm reduction advocates. Majority of us on the other side for tobacco control, they get millions of dollars, and we really can't really fight with them. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, that sort of going back to Mexico, Joseph just spoken about the influence of Bloomberg-funded NGOs specifically. Is that something that you're also seeing a lot of in Mexico, and to what extent?
Well, yes, the influence cannot be denied. Even it happened last year. One bill that was audited, or it was a project that was going to be reviewed by the Health Committee in the House of Representatives, the Cámara de Diputados. This document was like the analysis from this committee, but the project that circulated had not been prepared by the diputados, by the representatives. It had been prepared as it appeared. It showed in the news by a lawyer from Campaign for Tobacco for Kids. So the influence is very clear. I mean, when the union issued their statement when bans are best in 2020, the first presidential decree trying to ban importing in that time of vaping products also appeared. So there can be a connection, and the influence cannot be denied.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll stick with you for the moment with a question that I'll ultimately put to others as well. But this is the last question that I would like to ask before I invite contributions from you, which might take the form of questions to a specific panelist or to all of them, might take the form of an example from your own country that's instructive. And so I will invite those in a moment. But Thomas, just to give you a slightly more optimistic subject at the moment. Now, is there an example of another country, another jurisdiction in the world that inspires you as a good example of regulation? If so, what is it and why?
Well, good examples. I mean, yes, of course, we all vapers tend to see England as an example of openness from the government to the concept of THR, but also good examples with their, of course, limitations can be the New Zealand regulation and most recently the Philippine regulation. But what I would like to see, or I see like an example, is the shift of the way of thinking of regulators. They are starting to acknowledge tobacco harm reduction as a real solution for the smoking-related problems. And until we don't have that mentality shift, there is not going to be a very positive regulation, because if you regulate these products from the fear perspective, just being afraid of something, and because you exaggerate the risk and the damages, well, the regulation is not going to work for no one. If you size, or you want to size the opportunity that THR represents, and you shift this thinking, way of thinking, then you will have a proper regulation. We should start, regulations for vaping products and for THR are not to be made using the existing model. It is not just putting vaping alongside with cigarettes. It is creating new rules, creating a new way of respecting freedom for consumers, because it is consumers the ones that are expected to make the shift, to go from smoking to vaping or to using heated tobacco products. So the example of Philippines, for instance, and New Zealand, for me, is that they were embracing tobacco harm reduction. You know, yes, they still may have some restrictions that are not really necessary, or that they can be very restrictive, but the fact that they are embracing tobacco harm reduction, I think it changes everything.
Thank you. All right, let's hear, if we can, from some of you in the audience, whether it's a comment on anything that you've heard so far, a question, or an example. Yes, Harry. Do we have a, oh yes.
Thanks. It's really a question to Joseph and Thomas about Africa and Mexico, sorry, Africa and Latin America generally. Thomas mentioned that the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids had written a document for the government. And I suspect similar sorts of things happen in Africa, in Kenya, in various places like that. And it's almost like the ministries, the health ministries, just can't be bothered. That it's like the simplest thing to do is just to take a boilerplate kind of document and say, well, all you've got to do is treat these things like tobacco, and they don't have to think about it anymore. They don't have to do the things that Thomas said and construct new ways of thinking. They just think, well, WHO say we should do this, you know, that's... And it kind of makes me think that for a lot of these countries, tobacco control, despite what the politicians might say, is not that high up the political agenda. And they're quite happy just to kind of do the sorts of things that are damaging for people, damaging for smokers, because they don't really care an awful lot about what happens to people who smoke. It's your own damn fault. You could just stop. It's the old quit or die thing. So is that thinking about, you know, lower and middle income countries generally? I just wondered if that kind of resonates with you guys.
Would you like to take that one, Joseph?
Yes. For me personally, what I've been attempting to do on my own is talk to policymakers if we can come up with a nicotine policy. We have a tobacco control bill, but why can't we begin to introduce like a nicotine bill where we classify these products as they should? It makes it easier for sensible regulation, because right now, what I'm seeing happening in the future is that with these products coming in from China and these other places, we don't know what's in the product. We don't know who's manufactured the product. So when people get hurt from using these products, we take the blame for it, and we've been telling the government from way back to really put regulations in place, and that way it's better for all of us. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. I think we have another question or comment over here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Rasmus. I come from the tobacco industry and the snus industry. This question is mainly focused on Europe. Back in 1990, there was an unfortunate launch of snus amongst youngsters. And we had the internal markets in EU, or Europe as it was called, which in turn made a ban on snus in all of Europe. I think, Aniska, you spoke about this transposition of TPD into national law. And we see that Belgium is moving legislative on banning. France is probably Netherlands, as you mentioned. Do you envision that we can face a ban on nicotine pouches, for instance? Or has this effect of one country banning a product and that being the rule for the whole EU, has that been nullified? So it's basically two questions. I don't know if you get. Thank you.
So I would need to have a crystal ball to say in which direction the TPD will go, but definitely it's not a positive development. What is happening in Belgium, Netherlands, France, we saw, and I think still the proposal is pending in Finland as well, to ban nicotine pouches. And definitely the snus case does not help us, because these governments today, they are using the snus as a proxy to ban nicotine pouches, because obviously the similarity of the product. So they disregard all the scientific evidence, epidemiological data from Sweden, for instance, or Norway on snus. They just ideologically stick to that, and unfortunately the ECJ decision, the court's ruling, does not help us in this sense. So I think in terms of the next steps, what needs to happen is to have more countries on this positive side regulating the product in a very comprehensive manner, balancing the issue, the access of adult smokers to these products versus the youth appeal of these products. So we need to urgently have a proper regulation in place so that once the discussion around TPD comes and the revision, then the member states can balance, the positive developments can balance the negative developments. But indeed today it's not very promising what is happening in Europe. And again, as I said, completely scientific evidence is disregarded in those discussions. And obviously very emotional discussion around youth usage of the products is overriding all the rest of the arguments, and the benefit of the smoker and adult user is completely disregarded here. So that's why I think when it comes to this whole audience and various stakeholders, and we heard that there was a case in Philippines, the more voices we have, united voices, advocating for proper regulation, the more likely it is that we will get a proper regulation ahead of TPD in Europe, and we will prevent the snus case.
Thank you. Amplification of so-called youth epidemic sounds awfully familiar from where I'm sitting, living in the United States. And while we're on media noise, before we take another question, let's bring Barnaby back in. Thomas, as many others would, cited the UK as one inspiring example of how things are being done with vapes. But it's not all roses, is it? I have seen some fairly negative media coverage. There may be some threats. How do you see it, the good and the bad, and any worries at the moment?
Yeah, I think the first thing to stress about the UK is that the UK is not an exceptionally tolerant regime in terms of the letter of the law. The law is more or less that laid down in the Tobacco Products Directive, which of course came into effect when the UK was still part of the European Union. It could have been repealed and liberalised since Brexit. It hasn't been, because the government has had one or two other things on its mind. But in essence, it is the same law as obtains in many EU countries. What is different in the EU, I think, is a bit less in the UK, what is different is a bit less tangible. I think the policy atmosphere generally has been more welcoming toward e-cigarettes and vaping, and indeed novel nicotine products in general. I think there is less zealousness toward heavy-handed enforcement than there is in many countries. And so I think it's those things, really, rather than actually a positively liberal regulatory regime that makes the UK stand out a bit. Now, as Will mentions, that may be changing. There has been a lot of media noise very, very recently, and I mean in the last, has that gone dead? I don't know. There's been a lot of media noise very recently, I think in the last month or 2 months at the most, about the use of disposables by kids. Again, of course, the word epidemic is being bandied around a great deal. But with disposables, we have the double whammy that not only is it underage use of nicotine, there's also a very strong environmental concern surrounding the sheer volume of units being disposed of. We've actually had the Prime Minister himself speaking at least twice in public, I think maybe 3 times on the issue, which is pretty unusual. So I think it's very, very likely there will be a disposables ban or some kind of restriction perhaps on reusability that amounts to a disposables ban in the UK. I think that's probably the biggest thing facing us. A flavour ban or flavour restrictions conceivable, but I think they're less likely. But I would reiterate, that in the UK it's about atmosphere and approach rather than about the regime itself being wonderful in terms of the letter of the law. And I would just finally very quickly contrast that with the United States, where if you look at the stated principles, the words written down, as it were, underlying FDA regulation, a lot of them are actually pretty reasonable. They're hard to disagree with. You look at the way it's actually been implemented and worked out, and it's little short of a disaster. So, regulation is not just about what the law is, it's about how it actually works in reality, in practice.
Great point, Barnaby. Yes, implementation, vital. Let's take somebody at the back for a change. Yes, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kariuki Michael. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a harm reduction advocate, a public health advocate, and an epidemiologist in Kenya. I run an organization called Harm Reduction Society of Kenya, which essentially is a group that we formed, 12 of us, made up of a lawyer, psychiatrists, fellow medics, physicians. And essentially what we aim to do in Kenya is to preach, or rather continue the advocacy for harm reduction in 4 key areas, tobacco being one of them. We also have alcohol, we also have HIV/AIDS, but tobacco harm reduction is one of our key focus areas that we advocate for in Kenya. This is a society that took 2 years to register. There was a lot of misconception in Kenya. What are we up to? We had to do a lot of explanation. But in short, we are taking some strides. We've done a lot of advocacy. And I may say that what we are lacking in Kenya is lack of knowledge on harm reduction. We've been talking to policymakers and asking them, our Tobacco Control Act is primarily derived from WHO's FCTC. But can you show us where you have defined harm reduction in that act? It was a deliberate attempt to leave it out. We know how harm reduction is defined in WHO's FCTC. And it is nowhere in the Kenyan Tobacco Control Act of 2007. And one of our advocacy is to try and enlighten policymakers and Kenyans that harm reduction indeed is recognized by WHO's FCTC. It's an issue of dialogue and trying to find out how best can we approach this. And I'm happy to say that we have realized that we have no policies on nicotine products. As early as 23rd May this year, one of the Kenyan senators did present a notice of motion in the Kenyan Senate to introduce regulation of nicotine, synthetic nicotine and nicotine products. And we see that as an opportunity to continue educating our policymakers that harm reduction is real, and it's one of the strategies that can be used to assist smokers. Definitely, as a pediatrician, I do protect a lot of the children, and I do understand the impact of assisting smokers to quit, and more so, having these products not reach out to our children.
Thank you for describing that work. the situation with the World Health Organization, which we can certainly speak to, and also the moves, the legislative moves afoot in Kenya. Let's take one or two more, and yes, gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Bengt Wiberg from Sweden, the founder of EU for Snus movement, also inventor and patent holder of a new pouch technology. I'd like to address this to the whole panel, but especially Mr. Barnaby. In March, I think it was, this year, Tobacco Intelligence revealed an annual survey among EU members of parliament. And if I remember correctly, almost 40% of those responding thought e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches are just as harmful as smoking cigarettes. Now, lifting to the helicopter view, anyone in this world can, within 5 seconds, if you Google, does nicotine in itself cause cancer? You will get no from FDA, you will get no from WHO. But my question to the panel is, how do we educate members of parliaments who decide all of the European, who decide everybody's life to understand, does nicotine cause cancer or not?
Thank you. We're sort of straying into the connected misinformation area there. But Barnaby, since he picked on you, I'll let you speak to that briefly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's right. We did a survey of members of the European Parliament, which was published earlier this year. In fact, not the first survey we've done. And consistently through them, though attitudes toward novel nicotine products among MEPs have shifted slightly year by year, probably the most interesting and consistent correlation is that the more that members of the Parliament know about these products, the more favourable they are toward them in regulatory terms. And that suggests to me very much what you're saying, that education is the key. It is not that people in fact have, a deep-seated, well-informed opposition to harm reduction. It's when they simply don't know what it is or don't understand what it is that they're opposed to it. I think if I can just sort of expand on that very briefly, Will.
Sure.
I think that gets us to a bigger issue, and this is probably equally applicable to other areas of harm reduction, such as provision of sterile needles for drug users. Part of the problem is that there is no social level argument whatsoever to be made in favour of smoking. Okay, there are maybe some theoretical libertarian arguments at an individual level, but that's about it. So the argument for harm reduction is really not like saying, oh look, we're going to add something wonderful to society here by offering these novel nicotine products. It's actually saying we're going to make this thing that is really bad a bit less worse. And I think that is a much harder sell than saying, okay, here we have something that is going to be positive for everybody in society in some way or another. Now, I think all of us in this room understand, that at a population level and a social level, the effects are positive, but it's difficult to bring across. It's complicated.
Thanks, Barnaby. I realise I've been horribly biased towards this side of the room, and I'm definitely going to take one from here in a moment. But before we do, just one for Agnieszka. So we've heard about outside influences, Bloomberg, NGOs, the World Health Organization. But what about a tobacco company? What influence, if any, can you exert? What can you do? What can't? I mean, presumably you can't just sort of shove a few euros at key decision makers, and or if you do, you can't tell me about it. But no, what's your role, and how can you do anything, if indeed you can?
Maybe before I answer the question, I would turn back your question on Sweden to you, because actually, as I mentioned before, the evidence comes from Sweden. I mean, you know, the lowest smoking rates, the lowest rates of smoking-related diseases. Why Sweden is not talking about their own case? Why they are not promoting the case? And I think that's one of the issues. You know, even the countries that actually experience the positives of harm reduction approach, traditionally, they are not vocal about it, and Sweden would be the best case to do this, you know, educational attempt, whether this is European Parliament or, you know, the European Commission or towards other member states. So I leave it unanswered, but okay, so we need to have a bit more coaching, actually, not really education about nicotine, but So the tobacco industry, obviously for us, is extremely challenging because, as we have heard, and I think everyone agrees, there is a lot of hostility towards the industry in general. And I think it doesn't apply only to tobacco industries, general attempts, so approach to the industry. I think what we bring to the table, I mean, is the knowledge, the technology, the understanding of the products, and the science that we produce, and everything that we can actually improve the products and address the problem of smoking with our technology. So obviously we make the attempt to participate in all the public consultations in fora like this, actually, to exchange the views and to see where we can have alignment with other stakeholders. But indeed, it's quite challenging, let's be honest, for us, and alone we cannot achieve much more. So we need the support from this group as well. On the other hand, I think sometimes it's also difficult for the regulators to understand that the regulation is actually good for everyone, including the industry, because regulation can, first of all, you know, moves the market into legitimate market, so it can fight against illicit, not legitimate producers and products. It can also install responsible marketing practices and mandate them so that, you know, we are not disrupting with irresponsible marketing practices the market and not damaging really the confidence in the products and also in the industry. So that's our role, I think, being responsible as well and showing that we can do it in the right way and we can be part of the solution, not the problem only.
Thanks very much. Okay, let's come over here. Yes, sir.
We've heard about the UK being a leader. Cigarette sales in last year in the UK were more than half of what they were just over 10 years ago. And I think I've seen some pretty big numbers from Philip Morris regarding the success of heated tobacco in Japan. Why aren't we just shouting this from the rooftops, and wouldn't other European countries bite your hand off for that rate of decline in cigarette sales?
Thank you. I think quite a lot of us are trying to shout that from the rooftops. What's your take, Thomas?
We do. We in Mexico cite how smoking has astonishingly going down in Britain. I mean, if you compare it to Mexico, we cite the Japan example, we cite the Sweden example. I mean, yes, Sweden has a large population of tobacco users, but most of them are snus users, not smokers. The thing is that that what we need is a change of mentality. You a few minutes ago you said that there was no case for smoking, but theoretical freedom arguments. Come on, I am not convinced about that in the sense that freedom is no theoretical, and that agency, autonomy of people must be respected. Yes, in the case of combustible tobacco, there are damages that support restrictions and limitations to freedom. But when you have these new products with a very low level of risk, there is no justification to infantilize people and tell them what to do. You just need to let them decide. So the thing is, THR regulations that take THR should need this change of mentality. And until that doesn't happen, you can cite or you can scream whatever good results are in other countries. You don't know what people tell us in Mexico, the authorities or the THR deniers. They say, oh, Britain is okay, they have their good results, but Mexicans are not British people. yeah, it's true, but we are humans at the end, and you expect that there might be some differences, but smokers are smokers in the whole world. So they just don't care because they are married with this abstinence ideology.
Thanks, Thomas. And let's stick with you to pick up on something that you said earlier. You were talking about how with these new and completely different products, it's inappropriate to use cigarette and tobacco regulations as a starting framework, even if there are concessions and variations. So, okay, we're designing whole new regulations for these new products. Without going into granular detail, if you were to sort of venture some just broad principles for good regulation, what would you come up with?
I think we should distinguish the effects of each policy, from restrictive, neutral, and positive. Which is a neutral policy, the one that tends to regulate the product, like enhancing quality, protecting quality, making safer products. I mean, it's neutral in the sense that it does not promote, neither restrict consumption. It just makes the product better and safer, right? Then you have the set of rules that have a negative effect towards consumption, which is, for example, I am not saying that they are bad. Negative effect is that they tend to lower consumption. They are useful, for instance, when you want to protect minors and prevent uptake, but you have to balance them with positive rules that enable uptake, right, for adults and for smokers. So if we see the current policies, and as Harry just said, smokers have been abandoned, those policies are focused on prevention and are focused on the destruction of the product. So a good regulation should always respect the agency of the consumers, should always be based on proper information, and misinformation must be forgotten, and should, in a balanced way, acknowledge that these products are not tobacco and they do not represent the same risk. If a new product not related to tobacco is going to be regulated, we should analyze its risk and regulate it in the way we see fit. But we don't have to start the regulation of THR products locating these products just as tobacco. The problem is that the current legislations, the FCTC, do not recognize the continuum of risk. So that's a problem. They don't understand that these products should be regulated differently because the current laws, the FCTC itself, is designed to apply the same rule to every tobacco product. So, yeah, it's the easy route just to regulate vaping as a tobacco product. You don't have to think much about it, right? But then you would not have positive rules enabling uptake. And that's the sad part, because the smokers are the ones that have been left behind in the tobacco control era. They just don't care if they quit or not. They know they will eventually die. And what we have to do is we have to think that there are 1.2 billion people in my country. There are 17 million people that can really benefit from a more humane and empathic regulation, and that is a THR-based regulation.
Thank you, Thomas. It struck me how a couple of your suggested principles there about respecting personal agency and accurate information, as in the harm reduction adage, just say no with a K, are actually ones that people would apply to the harm reduction movement more broadly. Okay, let's bring somebody else. Yes, sir.
For your information, Malaysian Parliament is going to debate a new tobacco bill maybe in October, I guess. But what is disturbing about this bill is that there is an article said that it is prohibited for anybody to claim that alternative products is meant for smoking cessation or tobacco harm reduction, meaning that we cannot say anything about tobacco harm reduction after if the bill is passed. So my question is, how if any of you got experience about this, how are we going to go about it? I mean, we are still going to promote it as a smoking cessation and a less harmful products, but it will be prohibited under this bill. So that is my question. So how are you going to go about it?
Thank you. Joseph, would you like to respond to that? I don't know if you've come up against similar situations.
Well, I think there's a way you can play around with words on social media and not be seen to be actually talking about the product, where you stick to talking about the science of the product. I think that's the way you can do it. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't think they can tell you not to say that nicotine does not cause cancer, because that is just true. So do not mention electronic cigarettes, but just mention the science behind it. I think that's the way you could do it.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I think part of the problem, all goes back to the WHO. And that's the elephant in the room. And all of you are pussyfooting around the problem. And that's part of the problem. Malaysia is where it is because the WHO says e-cigarettes are more harmful than combustible cigarettes. And everybody then makes policies based on what the WHO says. Unless you address the WHO fantasies, it's going to be a problem to try and get a proper regulatory framework. Low middle income countries behave like the WHO is God and what they say is the gospel. But the same can be said even for high income countries like Belgium, the Netherlands. I don't know what our leaders are smoking. And that's the problem. So we need to go to the source of the problem. That is the WHO. So that we stop wasting time looking at what this government is doing. The source of the problem is the WHO. And unless we address it, these problems will always recur. Because most governments will say, the WHO says, the WHO says. And that's what needs to be addressed. The time for window dressing and pussyfooting around an irresponsible World Health Organization is over. Right now in South Africa, we're about to adopt a bill that criminalizes smoking, where if you are found smoking next to a doorway, it's 5 years in prison. So we're going to have young people with criminal records and their futures destroyed for a habit called smoking. So I think it's time we stood together and say the WHO is a problem and address it. And on three principles. One, people who smoke must be there. The industry must be there. And the public must be there. You can't have a COP where they talk to themselves. That is not relevant to today. We've heard about the fact that there are many different products. The frameworks that are adopted were relevant in 2013 when there were no alternatives to combustible cigarettes, basically. But they are irrelevant now, and they need to be modernized because technology is with us.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So let's stop pussyfooting around. Joseph, in your experience in the African countries where you work, would you agree with that characterization of the World Health Organization as the source of the problem? How would you assess the scale and impact of its influence?
Like I said before, policies are drafted behind closed doors with people who are funded by... Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, well, I'm saying policies are drafted by people that are being funded from tobacco control. While us on our side, we do not have funding to do anything that can match that So if there's a way that we can come up with the funding for harm reduction for THR, that would really benefit, because most of us do it almost pro bono. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to come in on the question of the World Health Organization and its influence? Perhaps Thomas?
Well, the influence cannot be denied, especially in low and medium income countries, because there is no science being done there. So it is very easy to cite the WHO sayings regarding THR, and they will keep following what they said. In that matter, you are right. And I think that, at least for us, like consumers, what we have to do is try to show the legislators and the regulators that there is science that backs up THR. I don't expect the WHO changing their stance because it seems that they have married with the THR denialists. So what do we have to do? We have to keep trying to spread information, and I would like to believe that it is not very difficult to understand that vaping and the alternatives are way safer. You just have to have, proper information, and then everything is like common sense. But yes, in poor countries, in medium-income countries, the problem is the influence. It's almost absolute, and for a lawmaker to do something different is going against the current, and I guess they don't do it because of the political cost of that.
The precautionary principle in a political sense, perhaps.
I don't think it's even the precautionary principle. It is just an abstinence ideology. They just cite the precautionary principle as the same way they cite youth epidemic. That's why it's very important, and Mr. Clive Bates has been saying it in the last months. We have to rethink nicotine. We have to stop seeing nicotine as the devil they have made people think it is.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to fit in a couple more before I ask for concluding thoughts, and we have one right at the front here. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. Stefan von der Heiden, I would like to comment on the WHO point that was just under debate right now. I've been to every COP or INB the last 15 years, and the WHO, seems to be the problem, but what gives the WHO the power it has? The power is not the WHO itself. It's the NGOs and the sponsored NGOs behind it who drive the agenda and have the manpower behind it to bring that to force. And the other thing, and this is something we all can influence, even today, are the member states itself. The WHO was always in trouble when we were successful in getting well-balanced delegations to a COP, when it was not the ideological eckheads just relying on each other. When we were successful, it was because there were other parts of the government it were professional diplomats that didn't follow the very special rules that a COP functions under. And so if we broaden the audience and the people that make the difference and that negotiate, then we have an impact on it. I know it sounds more simple than it is in practice. Some countries, all regulatory aspects belong to the Ministry of Health and nothing else. I come from a country where it's totally different, where you have 3-4 ministries involved, and then you have to have the chance to get for a well-balanced delegation and to get scientific impetus and less ideological driven motivations into a delegation. But that's the real source, that they are a closed club of ideologists sitting together and enjoying themselves, let me put it that way. and that it is staffed and funded by NGOs, well staffed and well funded and well organized. Even the big companies, big tobacco companies, aren't able to make something happen like at a COP, that each and every day, every delegate gets an 8 to 16 pages leaflet written overnight and produced and printed overnight. Even the big companies are not able to do that or not willing to spend on that. So it's a bit more, if you look into the details, it's more complex, of course, but there are chances to influence and to make a difference.
Thank you. The closed ideological club behind the World Health Organization will park that. I'd like to hear from a couple more people before we get to concluding thoughts, where any of you can comment to anything said just now. We've had a guy there in waiting.
Good afternoon. My name is Joel Sawa. I come from Uganda. I lead an organization called THR Uganda, and I work with CASA, as well as a KSE scholar ongoing. So I have a question. I see that a lot has changed over time, especially in the past decade or so in relation to THR and everything revolving around safer nicotine and the alternatives. So my question comes in from an angle of advocacy. Part of my work in my country is making sure, as you know, or rather, as you know, Uganda in itself is one of the countries that have adopted some of the most stringent laws revolving around tobacco, and the law in my country is a blanket ban that includes electronic cigarettes as well as anything that is safer nicotine, any other alternatives. So there's actually a complete hindrance to any access or availability of the same, both the selling and distribution. Now, in light of this, I look at the low and middle income countries and the changes that have been coming over time, revolving in the same areas. And I see that advocacy comes in as a very big need. A very big need in the sense that we need people sensitized, people educated. We need lawmakers to come to the point of dialogue with us. But then again, the processes are not as easy as it seems. We find a lot of difficulty. Now, my question is, in the face of, because even as there have been developments around THR in the past decade or so, the same goes for government and how it approaches our discussions. Even tobacco control has adopted some other tactics that are seemingly aggressive towards us. So what then, from an advocate's point of view, or rather in advocacy, do we need to change? Because we also need to change with the times. What will facilitate these changes? What are the kind of strategies we need to take for the next decade? Because I see tobacco harm reduction for the next decade. So much is changing. What do we need to change? What do we need to go with this particular flow, so to speak?
Thank you very much. That's a great question. What do we need to change in advocacy terms? We've got the forces behind the World Health Organization. I'll take one last thought, and then I'll ask each panelist to conclude, in which they may come back at those questions. Yes.
All right, thank you. This is Jason from Two First in e-cigarette industry media. Correct me if I'm wrong. So this is directed to Thomas. The main power behind the Mexico e-cigarette sale ban was President Lopez, right? And so, with the main pusher behind this ban from such a top position, do you have any advice on, or what are your options at that point? And do you have any advice for other countries in a similar position?
Well, I think the main pusher of the ban and all these restrictive policies is not the president himself. It is Dr. Lopez-Gatell, who is the sub-minister of health, and he has been very, very active in getting this done with the COFEPRIS, which is like our sanitary agency, like kind of FDA. Today, the only way that you can obtain some changes is by the courts. I mean, in Mexico, we have some kind of trial called the Amparo trial, kind of an habeas corpus. And several companies have filed their amparos, and some of them have already won. But if you keep having a government that is married with the abstinence-based model, you will always have to face obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And what I think is advocacy should try to let regulators understand that there is a different route, not the easy one, not the just copy the FCTC and put e-cigarettes in the same place as tobacco. The route in Mexico today is through the courts. And eventually, I hope we will get a proper regulation, or at least some kind of regulation. But I don't think that will happen maybe this and in the next year. I think if we have some kind of regulation, it will happen in the 25 at least.
Thank you. Time is running short. I really don't want to keep all these people from the caffeine and sugar that awaits outside. But for just a final thought, let's turn to the sort of the tagline above us, the next decade, and just sort of zoom out. And I would like to ask each of you, in under a minute, bearing in mind the forces ranged against THR and the question of how we can improve our efforts, do you count yourself optimistic or pessimistic about the regulatory future in your jurisdiction, and why?
Pessimistic, unfortunately. Because the forces behind, we're trying as much as possible to fight, but at the moment it's just not looking good.
I also tend to be pessimistic, but that's the way I am. But the thing is, in Mexico, we already have a prohibition. So we have come to the worst possible scenario. Well, maybe the worst one is that they ban also usage. But what we are we are in the lowest bar. So theoretically, any kind of regulation is going to be better, right? So, but I am not positive about a profound THR embrace, because for that you need to change how public health has been managed, and for me, public health tends to minimize autonomy of the people in several aspects, and I think that unless we regain some freedom and some self-decision capabilities, regulations always going to tend to be restrictive, right?
Thank you, Thomas. And Barnaby, if you could speak briefly to the UK.
I'll try and speak briefly as well. I guess the big things that come home to me are the conflation still of smoking and nicotine as being the same thing, which is difficult to overcome. And I think also the kind of post-truth environment we're living in, where, in a sense, what really matters is not whether kids vape, it's whether kids are perceived as vaping. It's not whether they like flavors, but whether they're perceived as liking flavors. And unfortunately, all these perceptions are not easy to overcome just by waving, a piece of conclusive research. They're much more deep-seated than that. So for that reason, I would, in terms of the UK or Europe in general, I would classify myself as mildly pessimistic. I don't think, we're going to see a complete ban on THR or anything like that, but I think the atmosphere is likely to get slightly less friendly.
So
Agnieszka, can you tell us anything more hopeful?
For a change, I will try to be a bit naively, moderately optimistic, at least for EU. I think as more products, new technologies evolving, I think the consumer base will be growing anyway. So it will be more organic, so not really supported by the regulation, not yet. But I think with the consumers moving towards new products, I think we can gain more, because then we also have potential political power to influence the politicians. I just wanted to finish, maybe bridge to something that Thomas mentioned at the beginning. Regulation is of secondary importance, or a secondary stage. The first thing which needs to be achieved is the political endorsement of harm reduction, because then there is no longer a free ride for the civil servants. Then to address your point about delegations to the WHO, then the countries can be more vocal because they have the political support to talk about harm reduction and to say we disagree with this approach. And harm reduction is in the FCTC at the end of the day, and this is how we interpret that for the benefit of the consumer. So I try to be a bit more optimistic.
Thank God. And nice to get a glimmer of it at the end there. We're going to have to wrap it there. It remains for me to give profound thanks to our excellent panelists, Joseph, Thomas, Barnaby, and Agnieszka. And thank you to all of you as well for your engagement. It's been a pleasure.